Here we go on the Always Another Game podcast. Shaun, the behavior change coach here, specializing in performance of the mind and the body. And today I have with me a like-minded individual. I have somebody who specializes in nutrition and mindset coaching. We have a lot in common. It's going to be a very interesting conversation today to bounce some ideas off, maybe a bit more about the industry that we work in. But a good friend of mine from LinkedIn. Today we have Greg Fearon. Greg, how is it going?
Not too bad. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Good. You did say you were nervous before. So have we changed, or are we just trying to hide the nerves now?
It's continued from being nervous into excitement. They kind of go together for me anyway. They're a mix.
They do. I think it came up in a recent conversation I had actually, where we were saying if you don't have nerves when you're performing or doing something, we'd often say something's wrong. Right, you don't have to be fully nervous and anxious and panicking, but that nervous excitement, it shows that it means something to you. So this is a positive sign to get us going.
Yeah, for sure. I'll talk about that later. Actually, you've just got me thinking.
Note that one. Good. So we're going inside the athlete's mind today to share the highs and lows of Greg's sporting career and what he's doing now, but most importantly, how he's used those learned skills away from the game. And Greg has a background in athletics, in football, and in martial arts. So he got about a little bit in the sporting world, but he's got a good story to share in all of those. And I thought this was a perfect opportunity to be able to do that. So what I love everybody to know a little bit more to get us going, Greg, is who is Greg Fearon?
So Greg Fearon is a father of one. Jesus, he's 20 now. That's scary. I have two sisters who are both pain in the asses, but I love them really. And I'm a former worked in management, worked in the corporate world. If anyone remembers Car Phone Warehouse, my teams, we used to answer the phone to you. Worked in the NHS in women's health as well. So at one point I used to run gynecology, endocrinology, etc. So some real insights there, especially into women's health and health service. And now I help women who are trying to grow their businesses become the CEO of their body. So that's what I do now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Obviously, being involved specifically in women's health within the NHS, you're going to see and learn a lot, right? Which puts you in a fantastic position to be able to support that, because some coaches work with everybody, some just males at 40, some women. So it's interesting that that's already, we can see that kind of process into what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's working in women's health was an eye-opener for sure, and the health service in general, just what it exposed me to, game-changing for sure.
Well, feel free, because this is a kind of a great start, really, because it is a fantastic topic. I mentioned recently on here that I was sitting in the car listening to the radio, and they've said there's been a massive spike in female suicide. When we talk suicide, often it's male. It's the highest, I don't know the right term would be, but highest killer of men. And I think people know that, but I don't think they understand the women's side. So, what was some of the stuff that you did experience, which has kind of led you down this path?
If I take it right back to watching my mum and my two sisters grow up and struggle with their weight, that was the initial kind of how I ended up doing what I do. So my sisters and my mum struggled, and being the only boy in the family, obviously my dad was around as well, but being the boy, no one listened to me. The women in my family do not listen to me. So I used to be a bit of a geek. I A-level, GCSE PE, biology, chemistry. I was always into that kind of stuff. And I would read up about health and stuff, and I'd tell them what to do, but they wouldn't listen to me. Ever. It was the most frustrating thing. They'd be like, Greg, what should I eat? And then they'd go onto the computer and Google something, and I'd be like, oh. So, but watching those struggles just kind of led me to end up where I am now, coaching women and helping them to lose weight, get in shape, but feel good about themselves holistically, rather than just slamming themselves into another diet and struggling with it all again. So, yeah, and I think my detour, post-sport and uni into the NHS was a really good complement to that, just to see how complex women's health can be. So I used to run maternity, gynecology, and all of those services in between that. And my God, it's a complex pathway with some really complex situations for the women, for sure.
Yeah, you went straight in the deep end then, right?
If you're going to do it, if you want to learn to swim, you got to jump in, right?
Yeah.
It was always interesting especially working with complaints as well. So I used to run the management. I was kind of the manager for that team, but the doctors would send all the patients who had really bad experiences to me, and I'd be like, "You're the manager of women's health," and I'm like, "Yeah." But what's really weird is that their gynecologist was often a man. It was so weird. But looking at things like IVF treatment and all of that stuff. So when the doctors found out what I did outside, because I used to do PT in the morning, go to the NHS, go out in the evening, do boot camps and all that stuff, they'd be like, "Listen, talk to this woman about why she can't lose weight, because she won't get pregnant if she doesn't sort her health out." So that gave me some really great clients, but also some real insights into how it all fits together.
That's good. I want to kind of stay here. We'll kind of take it back a little bit because there's a little link with weight there with yourself. Let's kind of stay there, because we spoke the other day about the coming on the podcast, and what came up was that you did have an incident on Threads with regards to kind of something similar. You're saying that, oh, you're a man talking about women's health, and a number of people will be open to it and supportive of it, but on this occasion there were some that were not. How did you deal with that then? If somebody you just said, people come up to you like, "Oh, you're the manager of women's health," because you're a man. How did you find that? How did you get around that challenge?
I think the only way to get around it is to be open with people and create a space where they can share. Now, I get it. Women don't always want to talk about things like their periods and maybe other gynecological problems. But for me, I've always been quite good at being able to hold space. And I know that's a very nebulous term, but people come to me and they want to talk to me. Crazy people, I don't know why. And yes, there were some people in that incident you mentioned who were very like, "Why is a man interested?" And I'm like, because we're all in the same boat. Women and men can't exist without each other. You have to have the hard with the soft, etc. So for me, I get people who've got some trauma and some issues around how their health has been treated, how they may have been treated by men. Get that. But if you're open to it, I can talk about all of those things too, because I care. Simple as that.
I think that's a huge part of it within coaching is empathy. It's like even if we're not talking male and female here, if we're talking living experiences, there's a number of things I haven't experienced that my clients have come to me for, but I have the empathy now within my coaching to understand that is okay. And just because I haven't experienced it doesn't mean I don't understand it, and that I can't understand it even more and learn about it. And I think that's a big element. And like you said there, you were kind of holding a safe space. People come to you, so there must be a know, like, and trust element. The fact that you were in that position of management was obviously a sign that you were able to do it for a majority. Did you ever come across scenarios like you had on Threads in real life when you did it?
I think when I first moved into, I think it was endocrinology, if I remember rightly. And there was a patient who had just been to see a doctor about a thyroid health. Wasn't happy about the consult, came to me. I took her into a room, so let's have a talk about all of this and what's going on. And she was like, "But you're a man, how can you understand all of this?" And I said, "Here's the thing. I went and did a degree in some of this stuff. I don't know the ins and outs of your body. But what I can do is not have the emotional connection to it. Because sometimes I think that lets you step back and see what the strategy might be. Because when you're in something, sometimes the emotion takes over and it clouds your judgment. But I guess I've got the ability to step back, and I can understand your emotion, but I can also step back and go, all right, but based on what we've got, the data, what can we do? So I think that's the thing, is like, you have to be able to have that empathy, like you said, but also be compassionate. But also, I think our superpower is that because we don't necessarily experience it, we can look at it all with fresh eyes and ask the right questions. I think that's a sign of a good coach, is that you won't experience everything your clients go through, but you can step back and say, well, what's the next best question that's going to help to find solutions or a better way forward? So that,
yeah, I like that kind of that emotional detachment, taking a step back. And yeah, because we're emotional creatures, right? And often when we act on emotion, it's not always in the best interest. And I would like to take a step back because earlier on you mentioned about your sisters struggling with their weight, your mum struggling with their weight. They weren't the only ones, were they? And this was your life before sport. You know, what was that like growing up? Because again, struggling with weight is never an easy thing, especially at a younger age. It can do, you know, a lot of physical and emotional damage as well. How was that for you?
So I guess growing up in a Jamaican household, food, everything revolves around food. And, you know, my mum would often do this thing where she'd be like, oh, you put on weight, but she would give you more dumplings. More jerk chicken. You're like, I don't understand what you just told me there. You know, you said I put on weight, you give me more food. But everything we did was centered around food. So I was a pudgy kid. I was overweight. I wasn't very athletic. And when I was I think it was be about 10 now, I thought, oh, I love sport. I love watching football. John Barnes was my idol. So I wanted to try and become a goalkeeper. So my way of practicing was I used to throw a ball against the wall as hard as I could and then try and dive to save it. My first game, as I mentioned earlier, I let in 8 goals in one half. Never played a game in goal.
Not the best start.
No, it wasn't a good start whatsoever. But also around that time as well, growing up, my mum used to leave me in front of the TV with Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, and those kind of old 70s martial arts films. You know, the ones, the really bad dubbing, the well choreographed fight scenes. So I used to practice that stuff, but I couldn't find anywhere to do it. So football was my route into sport. And then at about 11 and a half, I don't know what happened. I dropped some weight and I found I had some speed. I could not tell you where it came from, what happened. Maybe it's the Jamaican genetics. You know, we seem to produce good sprinters. So I learned I could run quite fast. I won the school sports day. Everyone was shocked. It was like, where did this come from? I don't know. And then my my foot and eye coordination went up. I could control the ball, and I was to start playing regularly. The hard bit though was that when I went to high school, so that 12-year-old to high school, so quite good, and people said, "Oh, you should go and play for a club." But growing up in a very Christian household with Sunday football does not go together. So that was interesting because my mum, my dad said to me, right, we're going to send you to football on a Sunday because it'd be good for you to get you off the street, all of that stuff, because you have training in the week and all that stuff. But then my mum was like, well, he's going to play football on Sunday, it means he can't go to church. That was a real conflict because I think especially as well in West Indian households, especially, sport isn't seen as a way of real progress. Like, because there's only 1 in a million chance you're ever going to make it pro and make some money, right? There's either be a doctor, accountant, lawyer. Doing sport was seen as a waste of time. You know, I'll go and read your books or something rather than go and play sport. Big one. So yeah, that was a real change in my life. A real pivotal moment was when my dad said, right, I'm going to take you to football. And then subsequently I started to find athletics and I ran for a club.
So you ended up going to football over church? That was, it was. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, when you say kind of like waste of time, I think even growing up for myself, I feel there was an element of that. You know, I was told to aim my sights a bit lower. You know, people told me, well, you're never going to make it that far. What else are you going to do? And I see it. I never made it to that point. The bit that I share on this show a lot, at the age of, what was I been? I would have been aged between 17 and 19. I was outscoring in major tournaments players that are now playing in the NHL. I'm not saying necessarily I was a better player than them. I'm just purely talking points here. But at the same time, there was obviously some sort of comparison because this wasn't just one-off tournaments. This was a couple of international tournaments for Great Britain. Looking back now, I know there was loads of pieces of the puzzles missing that I missed out on. But if we're talking about aspirations and we're talking about was it a waste of time, I was right there. I was right. I could have been right in the mix. Possibly. I never know. I can't go back. But what I know now is sport was never a waste of time because some of my best years were playing sports. And it's led me to this podcast, this conversation we've had. It's led me to the coaching role that I'm in. And that's the whole point of what we're doing here, is to show people that, okay, it is a very difficult statistic to be able to make it to the elite. It is. It takes obsession. It takes everything. But there's so much more to it: community, friendship, discipline, resilience, skill, hard work, knowledge. Like there's just so much to it, and it's not a waste of time.
Never. I can never say at any point that I ever felt it was a waste of time. Even when I didn't, maybe, we'd go to a game and we'd hear there were scouts from like top division clubs or whatever, and you didn't hear anything. I never felt, oh, that was a waste of time, because there was a joy for me. My joy in sport, especially football, was I was an old-fashioned winger. John Barnes was my idol. My one thing in life was to get the ball and beat my fullback to get the ball across. And I would base my game on how many times I did that. That was it. That was happiness for me. And I never felt at any time it was a waste of time. Even when we lost, there was something I could learn, do better, etc. So for me, it was never a waste of time ever.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that last bit there, because I do this session on the ice on a Wednesday night. We call it's called PEP. It's very thinking demanding, and you can see the players making multiple mistakes every session because in a way it's designed for that. It's complex. I would have struggled when I played. Yet what we're trying as coaches to get across to them is like, if you're not making these mistakes, you're not trying hard enough anyway. It should be constant mistakes here in training at this phase. We don't want to see it all the time. If we see it all the time, we've got to strip it down to an easier level because we don't want constant. But it becomes such a big battle that the whole concept of making a mistake is learning. And like you said there, if you lost, you learn. You don't lose, you learn. That's what a lot of people say. Some people argue, no, you lost and you should take that. But you do. You learn, okay, well, we lost. How do we avoid losing next time? Same with our clients. I'm assuming similar with you. Do you have that kind of approach? If they make a mistake, how would you deal with a client who made a mistake?
Sometimes I celebrate the mistakes more than I do the wins. Like,
I bet that confuses them.
They're like, what? Like, Greg, oh, I went out on the weekend, overate. Awesome. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, okay. So what, did you enjoy it, first of all? Yes. Okay, great. So it's taken you off your path. So what can we do next time that's going to be different? That means you still get enjoyment and you stay on track with your goals. And that just removes all of the guilt and the shame around it. Because, in our world, there's a lot of guilt and shame tactics. There's a lot of, oh, you failed and all of this stuff, slimming world. Oh, well, you didn't lose any weight this week. All that kind of stuff. And the thing is, I say to clients, like, I don't really care about your weight. I actually don't care. Like, they'll message me and go, Greg, I'm 25 pounds down. I'm like, woo, awesome. But I don't care about it. What I care about is how you feel, how you grow as an individual. That's all. That is it. So when you come to me with, oh, this doesn't quite work, let's break it down. How are we going to make it work next time? That's my role as far as I'm concerned. I'm the guide, the little Yoda, maybe, Mr. Miyagi, to help them and show the mistakes. And I think watching a lot of those old kind of martial arts shows helped me understand that. And if I use one that everyone's seen, Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. Daniel's son thought, oh, I'm just cleaning the car. But it's always got a bigger lesson because the mastery is in the mundane. It's always the basics where we we kind of try and get a bit too clever. But Mr. Miyagi was showing him that, hey, this is a block. You can clean a car with it, or you can block a punch with it. And when you go in with that mindset, I think you can make exponential progress in anything you can do.
Yeah. It's interesting. You say Yoda, I see myself as the donkey from Shrek. I'm the entertaining one that gives good advice, but, you know, nobody really takes me too seriously. That's how I see it. That's how I see it. Yeah, it is about them. It always has, always will be. And going to any coach or guidance, it's always the coach is the accessory, the trusty steed, never the one that's going to do it for you. And you mentioned there was a big crossover with martial arts, because obviously, you know, you played a decent level of football. What was the change between that then into finding the martial arts? Because you did have a feeling about it, but you didn't actually do it until a lot later.
Yeah. So what happened was, as I said before, I can't remember if I said it off before we started, Jamaican culture, there is this thing about 70s martial arts films and Westerns. They love them. In fact, my name, Gregory, is from Gregory Peck, who used to be in all those Westerns. Hey. And I think a lot of it was about the struggle, because it was always a classic, right? Westerns and kung fu films, always the same theme. But I was always interested in how they were able to move and how they sat and watched animals and decided to take that technique from that animal and weave it into this encyclopedia of movement, health, etc. So what happened was, so I'm just going to tell the embarrassing story. Mum used to have these scarves, right? And I used to get my plimsolls, my white socks, and I used to get my mum's scarf and tuck it into my trousers like they did on those old kung fu films.
Yeah.
I used to make noises in front of the TV. But I couldn't find a teacher. So obviously then football and athletics kind of took over. When I was about 14, 15, I found a kung fu teacher around the corner from me. And that was it. I was there. So my week was literally Monday and Tuesday would be kung fu. Wednesday would be football training, especially winter. Thursday might be on the track. Friday, I might have a day off. Saturday, Sunday, play football. That was my week in a winter. But it's amazing because they all complemented each other in different ways. So yeah, that's why how I got into it.
Yeah, cross training is important in my opinion. There's a lot of kids today that find a sport and stick with it young, and I think for many different reasons it's dangerous. You're looking at higher risk of injury because you're not diversifying your movements. There's obviously burnout and loss of passion if you do too much too often, and I think it's important for kids to try different sports. Because even if you have a passion, I think I knew for a while that I preferred ice hockey to other stuff, but the hand-eye coordination of baseball was massively important to how good I was with hand-eye on the ice. You know, being a wicketkeeper at cricket, you know, again, hand-eye coordination, a bit of agility, powerful reflexes, it all complements each other. And as much as a kid might go, you know, I love football. Yeah, but still try and play some tennis. Or my boy, he does a multi-sports class. And I always say to the missus, I'm like, I want him to do that because the teacher makes him do dodgeball, basketball. I don't know what he's going to love. And that's the thing as well. What you said is you didn't get into sport till late, really, considering as what people claim the norm. You know, what was it, 11? Was it 11 you
11,
said?
11, 12, yep. Was when I first started getting football properly.
And that's what I want people to know is if you do stuff before that age, just let kids be kids, you know, climb in parks, play football, you know, run around, do some jumping and climbing. You just never know when it's going to happen. One of my best mates from ice hockey came in at like 14 from roller hockey. Well, if he didn't play roller hockey, he would have never played ice.
Yeah.
But he came straight into ice hockey, into the England team. Wow. And then, you know, he played pro and stuff as well. You know, so you don't have to start at 5, 6, 7. There is loads of time. You know, if any parents are listening to this, if you've got kids and you're worrying about them, give them the opportunity to find something, and you just never know.
And I'd also just add on for those parents, like, it's not too late for you either. Like, if you want, I think the one thing I've always grown up with is I understood why my parents didn't value sports so much. They only had, we didn't have lots of money. The world wasn't the way it was now. But for me, exercise, being in the gym, has been a role model to my son. That's all it ever was. And I think if parents can do that as much as possible, it allows kids to, because you know what it's like, right? Kids see everything. You can tell your kids to eat healthy, but if you don't eat healthy, they saw you. They know that you took 4 chocolate bars out that night. They know.
Yeah.
So the more that we can role model the behaviors, the more likely they're going to grow up and do the things that you do, because you're their hero. They watch you. So for me, the more that, as adults, if you want to do park run, go to the gym, whatever, go climbing like I do now, like do something, and maybe do it with them as well. Kick about in the garden. Like my son and his mum split up when he was quite young. So I missed out on a lot of opportunities to kick about in the park and stuff. And I regret that now for sure. But anytime I had a chance, let's get a ball, let's have a kick about, let's play, let's wrestle. Because I think that's it. That was important for him to see.
Yeah, but its action speaks louder than words, and we mimic. We if everyone here just kind of took a second to think about who they are as a person, their beliefs, their habits, how they look, comes back to to family generation, and it has a big impact, and you can change it as well if you don't like how it was formed. You can change it, but it's really interesting. You say that about doing it for the kids, because that was me when I finished playing. I was lost. I trained all my life from probably the age of 14 for ice hockey, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed sport-specific training, explosive power, strength, sprinting, loved it. Yeah, I finished playing. I was like, I don't want to do it anymore. And it's like, well, what are you going to train? Well, I don't really fancy getting bigger. I don't really fancy getting even leaner. Like, I don't really know. And for a while, I was lost. And then when I realized, it's like, no, I'm training at the time, just for my eldest, but, the other one wasn't born, just got to train and to be strong and to protect and to be energized. And it gave me a different type of purpose and passion. It made me realize I didn't have to train the same way, but it gave me a purpose to continue to be active and to be strong. And I think that is important, because one thing you use, one of your ethos is everyone is an athlete. Explain a little bit more about how you kind of built that and came about that.
I think what happens is that we only see athletes as the people on TV or whatever with pro contracts. My thing is that the woman or the guy that goes for a run every day, he's a runner or she's a runner. The person that goes to the gym and lifts some weights, they're a bodybuilder. So I think one of the things I always tell my clients is, you're an athlete. If you're training regularly, you're an athlete. You're going to be in I can't remember what the percentage is, like the 1% of people that show up and are active on a regular basis. So as far as I'm concerned, it's really low. I think when I saw an American stat the other day, it's like only 3 or 4% of Americans hit the actual average of activity needs a week.
Wow.
And I'm sure in the UK it's very similar. So I always say to clients, you're an athlete. And that's also because that's how you speak to yourself. And I think that's the really important part of this all, is like, what you do will always be influenced by what's up here. And that's why you do behavior change, right? Because you realized it wasn't the exercise per se, it was the behavior. And that's the same for me. It's like, I say to my clients, hey, you're an athlete, you're a bodybuilder now. Oh, and once they make that connection, they start to eat better anyway. So if you go in with that mindset, I'm an athlete, I'm a bodybuilder, I guarantee that's half the transformation there and done. The way you taught yourself. So
how do you find that then? Do you find that they get to a point where it's like, oh yeah, I am an athlete, and then they become obsessed? We're very easily obsessed as humans, right? It's like we start off running, Next thing we know, we're doing couch to 5K. Then we're in a 10K. Then we're in a marathon. Now we're ultra marathon runners. We've got this of like, I've got to time myself. I've got to be better. I've got to do this. When you shift their mindset, because ultimately when we all say, if you wrote down on a bit of paper, what would you say as an athlete? We'd probably all write, Roger Federer and all this type of stuff. Do you find that they often do get carried away, or is it just a shift of, I'm just part of this process now and I don't need to be elite to call myself an athlete?
I've seen two types of clients. Ones that are like, because a lot of my clients have already kind of dabbled in exercise. I find I get a lot of ex-exercisers or ex-netball players, or, they used to do something but like took over. There's one group where they're like, oh, is this me now? Like, I see what I can do. What's next? And I try and encourage it because, like you said, it's like that cross-training. It's that actually, for me, it's also about finding out what they can do that they didn't think they could do. I've got a client who is doing high rocks now.
Mm-hmm.
She did her first one. So she's been working with me 4 months. She's just done her first one. Then I got a message like one evening, I'm watching Avengers or something. She's like, just so you know, I've booked another 5 events. I'm going to Amsterdam. And I'm like, what? Whoa, hold on a minute. Jeez. This wasn't in the plan. But she said, no, this is about what we talked about, Greg. It's about me showing up for myself and part of my vision. So one of the things I like to do with clients is create a vision for themselves. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm an athlete and I can do all of these things. So I'm like, hey, knock yourself out. As long as you don't get injured, I'm all good with it. And I think it's part of the human condition to want to better themselves. I think our job is to go, okay, hang on, you're pushing the limits of it there. We don't want you to get injured or hurt. But I actively encourage people to do more if they can within the limits. I'm not going to say do an ultra marathon tomorrow. Please don't do that. But where people generally strive for a better performance, they generally do better, I find. You see it in older people, right? When they give up their job, they start to decline. Mm-hmm. So I want my clients to not have that decline and look for something different. You might have trained in the gym for 4 months and now you're like, well, I want to do CrossFit or whatever. Okay, cool. Just don't get injured. Well, I'll try my best not to get injured. That's it.
And it's that fine balance, isn't it? There's nothing wrong with more. We are driven that way. Our dopamine, our happy hormone is the molecule of more. And that's what it wants, more. All right, we've reached 5K, right? What's next? Well, it's 10K, isn't it? And it's a natural behavior. And it is finding that balance between, do you need to? What is the desire behind it? And you mentioned again the vision, the purpose behind it. And if you've got that aligned, yeah, brilliant. Go be this completely other person. Maybe that's who you needed to become. For others, actually just finding a certain level and sticking to it is also a huge athletic win as well. Massive. And I think it's very important for people to understand it's okay to stay at a 5K. If you love just doing 5K and just running for the sake of running, it's absolutely fine. There may not be any aspirations to go further because you're happy, you're healthy, you don't have dodgy knees or ankles or hips. That is fine. For somebody at 5K who's got something eating inside of them, that something isn't right, it's not enough, to try and tame that can actually be more detrimental than accepting it and pushing for 10K. We are all different. We are all unique.
Yeah, and I think our job as coaches are to facilitate that conversation and understand the why behind it. Is it actually something else? Is there this comparisonitis, etc.? As like this client I was just talking about, she started looking up the average race times for high rocks, and I was like, okay, cool. If we want to get there, it's going to take us this amount of time. This is how we're going to train for it. Okay, cool. But at least I can guide her through that rather than her just jumping into it and being either really disappointed and going backwards or hurting herself, or both, which I think is the better way forward for sure.
What is it you love so much about coaching? Because I think when we get to the level we're at, you have to love it, because in our field, I know especially with personal training, it's a high turnover. People I love training, I'm going to be a personal trainer. I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. I went from training 2-a-days and completely having all this time for myself to like, oh my, I ain't got any time to train. I'm exhausted. I'm working late. I'm up at 5 o'clock. I'm caring for multiple other people, not myself. You have to love coaching in a different way. You know, what is it for you?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like being a PT and also seeing what used to happen to nurses in the NHS. Both two examples of where people put themselves before anyone else and they're always broken. So I was like, especially just before COVID, I was like, I'm tired. I was, in the morning with clients, training clients in the day, then I run a boot camp in the evening. I was like, this is not going to work. I need to move all the skills I've collected over the years into how I can do this online. The big thing for me is when, like I said, not necessarily when clients lose the weight or whatever, it's how they grow. Greg, I got a promotion. Greg, I'm going on a solo holiday because I've got confidence in myself to do that. Greg, my marriage is better. Greg, my relationship with my kids is better. So I think it's that love of I was able to help facilitate that. And it's the conversations I love the most. Like if you've seen one squat, we've probably seen so many squats over our lifetime that it's like, okay, we've seen a squat. And I think that the physical part is really important. I can look at someone and go, hang on a minute, what's going on with your ankle right there? We need to sort that out. But it's the conversations, it's the light bulb moments. It's the moment when you ask the right question and the client just goes, oh yeah, you can just see it on their face. That is the moment I love the most.
Yeah.
That is it. That's why I think that's why I do it. That is why I do it.
It's life changing. That's the word that I hear often. It's life changing. And 3 sets of 10 of squats, 3 sets of 10 of squats is better than doing 0 squats. But there was one challenge I did a little while back, and if people haven't seen it, there's a documentary on Netflix about the Blue Zoners, which is, I think it's called like Live to 100 or something like that. And they're the 5 places in the world that has the highest living centurion rate, but they don't just live longer. They live happier, more healthier, more energized. And anyway, I set a challenge for my clients based around the Blue Zoner concept. There's 9 life habits, I believe, but I kind of chose like 4 or 5. One of those was anytime that you're picking something up off the floor, you're going to your bottom cupboard, squat. Don't bend, squat. I did this. I couldn't believe how many squats I was doing in a day. Just being more mindful. Like if I put the dog bowl down on the floor for her dinner, I had to squat rather than bend. Honestly, we squat an awful amount, and this is what the Blue Zoners do. They squat down when they're gardening. They squat to pick stuff up. They are physically more active than just walking on a daily basis. They are these women in their 70s and 80s had massive biceps from kneading bread and gardening. It's like you don't have to go to the gym. People use this as an excuse, and this goes back to your clients with high rocks and stuff. There is so much out there in today's world. Just the same as the kids letting them experiment. Why don't you go experiment? Why don't you go try pickleball, paddleball? It's very popular. Hey, you just said you had netball players. There's, veteran leagues for netball players. There's walk-in football. Literally, there is no excuse not to be active in a sporting environment. You might just have to go and try it.
I've got to say, and I tell all clients, your body is the gym. And at first they're like, what? I'm like, no, your body is the gym. Like, you don't need to, I've got a client who might be have to travel for work, and they can't, I ain't got an hour to get to the gym. Cool. I'm going to put you together a training plan. You can train in a hotel. You can train in the post office if you want. But it's understanding that we have, 90% control of what happens to us. So use the body you've got. Use it as your weight. Use it to stretch. Use it to move. And there's infinite ways. And I think you're right. People get locked into, I've got to do the gym, or I've got to do this, etc. Now, of course, if someone says to me, Greg, I want to gain a lot of muscle, well, then of course we're going to have to say we need to do some resistance training. But there's a million ways we can do resistance. But I think you have to be able to go, right, actually, the vision I have for my life is that I'm active for a long time. I can do all the things. I can squat. again, I say to my clients, every day is leg day. So like your squat thing, I'm like, every day is leg day. Oh, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you walk on those legs, you have to run with those legs, you got to squat, you're going to have to lunge on them. You're doing legs every day. So yeah, I think once people get that concept of the body is the gym, it's endless possibilities.
My favorite saying is legs feed the wolves.
I want to keep my legs. I don't want the wolves.
But it was that was a trainer. It was an S&C coach for one of my favorite ice hockey players, and that was his thing: legs feed the wolves. As in, like you want to be good on the ice, you want to be good in sport. You need those legs because that's otherwise you ain't going to eat. So it makes a lot of sense. One thing you use a lot as well within your sporting and coaching analogy is how you do something is how you do everything. What do you mean by that?
Oh, there. I'll use you could use football, you could use martial arts training. I use martial arts training. It's probably the best thing. So when I went into corporate, I managed to go up the ladder fairly quickly. What I realized though was that all the things I was doing when I had 300 odd people to manage across 2 call centers, it wasn't anything majorly special. It was always the basics. So when I go to Kung Fu, our teacher would drill us in the basics. So we have something called horse stance. So really deep squat, arms out, and you have to hold. And the mind monkeys that go on while you're doing it, as he's going around checking everybody's form and you're too high, you start thinking about all these other things to distract yourself. And I think that's what that's what happens to a lot of us in all of these things. And I realized that in my career, I just got better at applying the basics, but that had come from martial arts, especially, or football. Like, how many times can I practice a pass? It's always the basics. How many times when I practice this kick? The kick gets better every time I practice it. So I realized that actually in people management, a lot of it is basics, but we get distracted by trying to do all of these other things. And that's why people can't stick to stuff. That's why people don't necessarily see the results in their nutrition or when they're trying to grow a business. Like for us, we have to post content every day, multiple places with different formats. The basics are the same, and you're only going to get success if you show up and do it. So that's how I see that. And that's one of the ways I see how we do one thing shows up in other places. And I credit, even now, being able to run a business to having to repetitively kick, repetitively punch, repetitively pass a ball, do all the same things in and out, again and again. So for me, definitely how you do one thing shows up in other areas. There's a slight tweak. And the only reason I say this is this. The things that we love and we're very good at, we're normally really excellent at. But the things where we don't feel as confident we kind of play it easy. We play it small and we say, oh, I can't do that. I'm not as good. So then I'll be able to reference that back to your work. I'm like, well, hey, miss, you run a company and you're making like 6 figures a month. You've got a building firm. You run all of these, people. Tell me why you can't do 20 minutes of working out. Because you're a badass. Okay, good point. Got it. Okay, I don't know how. Okay, awesome. Well, that's my job to work at, to tell you the how. But can you commit to that? Yeah. Okay. And then once they start to see that same consistency, they start to see that impact on their work. Because then they're generally a bit more consistent with how they lead their team. They're more consistent with how they show up for presentations. I had one client tell me, Greg, I've got the same presentation for the last how many months? I used to write a different presentation all the time. I was like, the first one was good enough. You just felt like you needed to do more. You need to be better at the basic one. And it was fine. So there we go.
Yeah, it's down to the basics. It is, and it's that compound effect. Talk about it a lot here. And the podcast that changed my life, it was a business / self-development one, American guy. So, but he would always use the example, even if you're flipping burgers, be the best burger flipper there ever was. Because I guarantee that if you are, you're not going to stay there very long. And like you said, you're going to climb up that corporate ladder quickly because you're not living to that level. You're living above that level, and you're excelling, and you're constantly, and people will see it, even if it's not your own employer or at the current time, people will see it, or you'll just outgrow the job anyway. And it is if you know, whatever level you're at, do those basics so well that you can't be ignored, because your foundation will be so much stronger. You'll be more resilient. You'll be able to learn more and have more opportunities from doing that. And especially in our industry, that's, I would say, probably the biggest thing, the biggest stumbling block for people who are starting out is overwhelm, that they feel like they have to do all of these crazy different things. They've got to go high rock 7 days a week, or CrossFit, or, you know, it's chicken, broccoli and rice only for the rest of your life. And I think this overwhelm actually stops them to actually what is needed. And the ones that come round quicker to making the basics sexy and compounding it, they're the winners.
Yeah. I can see it every time. Like the women I work with who do excellent start to nail their sleep first. They're like, right, 10 o'clock, 10:30, I'm in bed. And then they just see all of a sudden, sometimes I don't even have to talk about nutrition to them. It just gets better because they're rested, etc. And they're like, Greg, so what's the nutrition bit? I went, well, I've been looking at your nutrition and it looks like you're nailing it and you're losing weight. So what more do we have to do? It sounds like your issue was the sleep. And it's all these basics that make the magic happen. But I think people often let other things get in the way because of, my health isn't as valuable as making no more money. And I'm like, hey, listen, you're probably going to make more money if your health is on track. In fact, I've got clients who like, yeah, I've made more money this because I've got more energy, my brain works properly, I'm clear sight-minded, I'm not doing as much. I'm like, right. So, and I get it. Again, it kind of goes back to that, oh, well, exercise, even the word leisure center, especially if you come from a working class background, we go into a leisure center for, you've got chores to do, go and do your chores. that story in people's head is big. It's like, oh, I can't put myself first. And actually putting yourself first is the most important thing that anybody can do, and it will sharpen every area of your life.
And it will, because if those gas masks fall on the airplane, what do they tell you to do?
Put yours on first.
Put yours on first. Why? Because you're at your best then to then help others. You're no good to anybody if you've passed out.
Exactly. If you're broken, tired, not looking after yourself, not feeling as confident as you want to feel, what position are you to help someone? You're going to give them your 20%, and that's not going to help anybody. So, yeah.
You're not allowed to use overwhelm. Can't steal my one. What would you say is the biggest stumbling block for people getting started to wanting to improve their life, their performance, their well-being? What do you think is holding somebody back?
Asking for help. The biggest problem I see is that, especially with nutrition, kind of mindset practices, exercise now, like it's the only industry where everyone is an expert all of a sudden. Like, it's crazy. People come at me with like hormones and I'm like, do you even know what you're talking about? And it's not their fault, but this information is being made really digestible. So people keep trying it because they feel like, oh, well, it's my body, I can just sort my discipline out. And they fail. I think the average woman has spent 30 years on a diet at the age of 45, from what I've heard. There's different stats, but the average woman has spent 30 years on a diet. So that by that point, they're really skeptical, but they're like, right, I'm going to go into this because I don't want to fail again. The thing is, actually getting quality help, investing a bit in yourself actually will get you further than you trying to watch Netflix, see all the TikToks, and kind of mash it all together. Yes, we see people do great results on their own. That's like the 1%. And I think somewhere I read a study that said there was like 95% chance of actually hitting the goals or whatever if you've got support. So I think the big thing for most people, apart from the overwhelm, is get help. Simple as that.
Yeah, It's interesting because I became a PT because I got a PT. It wasn't because I loved training. I eventually realized I needed help. My game was getting no further and I was doing all this training. It wasn't progressing and I got help. And then I was like, I could do this. I did not know where I would be 14 years down the line, but at the time it made sense. And, you know, I can see why people train and enjoy it and go, oh, I can be a PT. Yet there's such a deep underlying issue. And I think more people need to understand how the brain works, not in its scientific complex, but just down to habits. And somebody put a fantastic example the other day about an elastic band, how we kind of pull on this elastic band, but it pulls us back every time because we don't know how to either just take a step back and just rest slightly on an easier band and then push forward to break it, or just to kind of push through to that breaking point. We don't know how to do that. And that's why people get stuck. It's external confidence, right? Something goes wrong externally, like I can't get to the gym, crash, rather than having an internal driver, that deeper purpose, that deeper reason for wanting to make a change. That's when you can push through all of those difficult times because you're internally driven. You really know what it needs to take. And I think more people need to understand that it isn't just coaches saying this because this is what we coach. We're coaching here for a reason. We've gone down the route of personal training or fitness instructor, personal training group. There's a reason why we're here now. And it's not because we don't want to be on the gym floor, because I know you still do a bit, I still do a bit, and it's okay for the right client. But most people, that's not what they need.
Yeah, most of my clients, they know how to train. They've done more classes than I even remember. They've done everything. So it's not that they don't know how to squat or how to bench press or whatever. It's never that. It's how is their lifestyle running the show. And my thing is always this, right? If you've got a vision for your business, your career, why don't you have a vision for your health? Because those things won't happen without the body.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that. So you've got to make it so that everything fits together. You know, so I go deep. I'm like, listen, I want to know what your spiritual goals are, what your relationship goals are, etc. But this body is what's going to allow you to do all of that stuff.
100%. Now, for anybody watching on YouTube on our video podcast, you might be asking the question, what is going on in the background of Greg's video? Anybody that's listening on Apple or Spotify, do check out the video, because behind Greg is a huge tiger. Fantastic looking piece of, I don't know, is it art? I can't quite make out. But you've got I quite like your story behind it. Greg, why have you got a giant tiger on the wall?
One of my other big things growing up was I love watching the big cats. I like how they move. I like how I guess that's the martial artist in me. And a lot of the women would come to me and go, oh yeah, I've got these stretch marks and stuff. And I'd be like, they're tiger stripes. Oh. Right? And I also talk to them, especially when they feel like giving up. I send them a clip of a tiger. So it's like David Attenborough narrating a tiger, and the tiger's hunting. I'm like, what's that? And the tiger will often fail in the hunt and they have to keep failing to get the result. Like they've got the monkeys in the trees. The monkey's like, oh, look, there's a tiger, warning everybody. So they have to go again and go again. Eventually they get the reward. So if you're going to be a tiger, that's how you got to roll. So that's the story.
I always love an animal analogy. For me, it's eagles. There's a fantastic motivational reel that goes around that I hadn't realized, but eagles can live to 70. But at 40, their claws become weak. Their beak isn't sharp anymore. And their feathers become too heavy that they can't fly. And they have a choice at that age. Do they die? Or they have to go through this really grueling phase of breaking down their beak to allow it to regrow. Same with the claws, plucking all the feathers out. They have to go through this really long, painful process, but it allows them to live 30 more years. But they have to make that choice. Well, funny enough, we have, our midlife crisis around 40, apparently. And it's the same thing. We have to go through these hard choices. And it's really interesting to use animals because we do have a lot in common, yet they don't necessarily have the emotional connection that we do. It for them, it's live or die. And we can use that, not to always that extreme. We are emotional creatures. There's a reason for that as well. But I think we can use these analogies of, animals failing so they can live. Yes, people don't like watching tigers kill other animals, but ultimately that is life. And if they, if they don't, they die. And, we can use these motivational things and show that, what is actually possible.
Well, and it's the same thing though, isn't it? It's like if you don't look after your health and eat properly, etc., then you're going to die earlier. What's going to be the impact of that? If you get unwell through like a metabolic issue, you're going to have to spend more time in the hospital. You can't run around with the kids. You can't have sex with your partner. Like, there's so many big things that can happen. Why wouldn't you do everything you put in your gift to prevent that now?
Mm-hmm. By making it as simple as possible. Back to the basics. Every time. Greg, thank you so much for joining me today. It's awesome. I always do enjoy having people in the same industry because you get ideas and different perspectives, and it's always great to see other people doing the right thing, because there's a lot of people within the industry that are doing it just to line their pocket, unfortunately. And it's nice to see people that are doing it because they love to see people change. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Good. Greg, is there somewhere people can find you? Is there somewhere you hang out more than others?
Yeah, so generally LinkedIn, Greg Fearon, you'll find me. I also use Facebook, so Greg Fearon there as well. My website is gregfearon.co.uk. I have a podcast that I'm about to relaunch, and Shaun is going to be one of my first guests, so that'll be out too, but I'll send all the links to you that you can have.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody that joined us today. If you took anything away from today's episode, then our work here is done. We only aim to help one person with every episode. And if you know somebody that could benefit from what we've heard today, please send it to them, add a review, anything that can help the podcast grow and get the message out there further. Because as I love to remind you all before I leave, that there is always another game. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.